The night I left my wife, I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even tell her I hated her. I simply packed one suitcase, looked at the woman I'd spent 8 years trying to make happy, and said, "I finally understand. Goodbye." She laughed. That laugh hurt more than anything she'd ever said to me. Because she genuinely believed I would come back. She had seen me leave before. She had watched me cry before. She had watched me beg before. And every single time I returned. But that night was different. Because 8 years of rejection had finally led me to one terrifying realization. I wasn't fighting to save my marriage anymore. I was fighting to convince someone to love me, and you can't build a life with someone who has already decided you're not worth choosing. My name is Daniel. I'm 38 years old, and this is the story of how I spent almost a decade begging my wife for affection, only to discover that walking away was the first time I truly loved myself. I met Claire when I was 27. At the time, I was working as a project manager for a construction company outside Chicago. My life wasn't glamorous. I worked long hours. I drove an old Honda. I lived in a tiny apartment with furniture I'd bought from garage sales. But I was happy. Then, one rainy Saturday afternoon, I walked into a coffee shop. That's where I saw her. Claire was sitting by the window with a book in one hand and an iced coffee in the other. She had this quiet smile. Not the kind people force for photographs. A real smile. The kind that made you want to know what she was thinking. I ordered my coffee, turned around, and immediately knocked into her table. Her drink fell. Ice scattered across the floor. I froze. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." She looked at me. Then she started laughing. "You look more terrified than I am." I laughed nervously. "I just ruined your afternoon." "No," she said. "You just gave me a reason to remember you." That was the beginning. We started talking. One coffee became two. Two became dinner. Dinner became weekends together. And before I realized it, Claire had become the person I called whenever anything happened. Good news, bad news. Something funny, something stupid. It didn't matter. I just wanted to hear her voice. After a year, I proposed. I didn't have an expensive ring. I couldn't afford one. But I took her to the same coffee shop where we'd met. I got down on one knee. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the ring. "Claire," I said, "I don't know what the future looks like. But I know I want to see it with you." She started crying. Then she whispered, "Yes." I thought I'd just been given the greatest gift of my life. I didn't know I was also being handed the greatest lesson of my life. Our first year of marriage was beautiful. We rented a little house in the suburbs. We painted the living room ourselves. We argued over furniture. The night I left my wife, I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even tell her I hated her. I simply packed one suitcase, looked at the woman I'd spent 8 years trying to make happy, and said, "I finally understand. Goodbye." She laughed. That laugh hurt more than anything she'd ever said to me. Because she genuinely believed I would come back. She had seen me leave before. She had watched me cry before. She had watched me beg before. And every single time I returned. But that night was different. Because 8 years of rejection had finally led me to one terrifying realization. I wasn't fighting to save my marriage anymore. I was fighting to convince someone to love me, and you can't build a life with someone who has already decided you're not worth choosing. My name is Daniel. I'm 38 years old, and this is the story of how I spent almost a decade begging my wife for affection, only to discover that walking away was the first time I truly loved myself. I met Claire when I was 27. At the time, I was working as a project manager for a construction company outside Chicago. My life wasn't glamorous. I worked long hours. I drove an old Honda. I lived in a tiny apartment with furniture I'd bought from garage sales. But I was happy. Then, one rainy Saturday afternoon, I walked into a coffee shop. That's where I saw her. Claire was sitting by the window with a book in one hand and an iced coffee in the other. She had this quiet smile. Not the kind people force for photographs. A real smile. The kind that made you want to know what she was thinking. I ordered my coffee, turned around, and immediately knocked into her table. Her drink fell. Ice scattered across the floor. I froze. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." She looked at me. Then she started laughing. "You look more terrified than I am." I laughed nervously. "I just ruined your afternoon." "No," she said. "You just gave me a reason to remember you." That was the beginning. We started talking. One coffee became two. Two became dinner. Dinner became weekends together. And before I realized it, Claire had become the person I called whenever anything happened. Good news, bad news. Something funny, something stupid. It didn't matter. I just wanted to hear her voice. After a year, I proposed. I didn't have an expensive ring. I couldn't afford one. But I took her to the same coffee shop where we'd met. I got down on one knee. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the ring. "Claire," I said, "I don't know what the future looks like, but I know I want to see it with you." She started crying. Then she whispered, "Yes." I thought I'd just been given the greatest gift of my life. I didn't know I was also being handed the greatest lesson of my life. Our first year of marriage was beautiful. We rented a little house in the suburbs. We painted the living room ourselves. We argued over furniture. We burned dinner more than once. We danced in the kitchen. On Sunday mornings, I'd make pancakes while Claire played music. Sometimes she'd sneak up behind me and wrap her arms around my waist. I'd turn around and kiss her forehead. Those moments were everything to me. I thought that was what marriage was. Two people choosing each other every day. Then slowly, things changed. Not overnight. That's what made it so difficult. There wasn't one dramatic event. There wasn't a huge betrayal. There was simply distance. Claire stopped reaching for my hand. Then she stopped hugging me when I came home. Then our conversations became practical. "Did you pay the mortgage? Can you pick up groceries? Your parents called. I'm going to bed." At first, I didn't worry. I thought she was stressed. She had started a demanding job. I told myself it was temporary. Then one night, I kissed her on the cheek. She moved away. I laughed awkwardly. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. You seem distant." "I'm just tired." I nodded. Okay. I believed her. Because when you love someone, you don't immediately assume they're falling out of love with you. You give them the benefit of the doubt. So I waited. A year passed. Then another. The distance didn't disappear. It grew. One night, I finally asked her the question I'd been afraid to ask. "Claire, are you still in love with me?" She looked at me like I'd asked something ridiculous. "Why would you ask that?" "Because I don't feel loved anymore." She sighed. "Daniel, I'm tired." "I know, but I miss you. Can we not do this tonight?" I nodded. "Sure." I went downstairs. I sat alone in the kitchen, and for the first time, I cried because I felt lonely inside my own marriage. The next morning, I decided I was going to fix things. I planned a weekend trip. I bought her favorite flowers. I wrote her a letter. I told her how much I loved her. She read the letter, then placed it on the counter. "That's sweet." That's all she said. I waited. Maybe she'd hug me. She didn't. Maybe she'd say she loved me. She didn't. I eventually walked away, but I didn't stop trying. I became obsessed with fixing our marriage. I read books about relationships. I listened to podcasts during my commute. I watched videos about communication. I tried date nights. I tried vacations. I tried cooking. I tried giving her space. Then I tried being more affectionate. Nothing worked. Whenever I asked what she needed from me, she'd say, "I don't know." Whenever I asked if I'd done something wrong, she'd say, "No." Whenever I asked if she still wanted the marriage, she'd say, "Of course." But her actions said something completely different. And that was the part that slowly destroyed me. Because she never gave me enough of a reason to leave. She just gave me enough reasons to feel unwanted. Our 5th anniversary broke something inside me. I had planned everything. I took the afternoon off work. I bought Claire a bracelet. I reserved a table at a restaurant downtown. I even wore the suit she'd once told me made me look handsome. I waited. 6 o'clock. 7. 8. At 8:47, she finally walked through the door. She looked exhausted. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She took off her coat. Then she noticed the table. What is all this? Our anniversary. She froze. Oh. I smiled nervously. Happy anniversary. She stared at me. Daniel. I forgot. I remember those exact words. Not because they were dramatic, but because they were ordinary. She had forgotten. I had spent days planning the evening. She had forgotten. I handed her the bracelet. I got you something. She opened it. It's nice. I nodded. Thank you. Then she walked upstairs. I sat at the table alone. 2 plates, 2 glasses, 1 unopened bottle of wine, and a bracelet sitting on the table like evidence of how foolish I'd been. That night I ate dinner alone. Then I put the bracelet in a drawer. I didn't cry. Not that night. Something worse had happened. I had stopped expecting anything. By our 6th year, we barely touched. We slept in separate rooms. At first, I told people Claire had trouble sleeping. Then I told them I snored. Eventually, I stopped explaining. Friends noticed. One of them asked me, "Are you two okay?" I smiled. Yeah, we're just going through a rough patch. That rough patch lasted years. One night, I stood outside Claire's bedroom. My hand was on the door. I wanted to knock. I wanted to ask her to come downstairs. I wanted to say, "Please tell me what I need to do." But I couldn't do it anymore. I realized I'd asked that question too many times, and every time I'd asked, I had been silently begging her to tell me I was worth keeping. I went back to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed, and I whispered, "Maybe I'm not enough." That was the darkest thought I'd ever had. Not because it was true, because I had started believing it. I changed. My friends noticed. I stopped going out. I stopped laughing. I stopped talking about Claire. At work, people thought I was simply serious. They didn't know I was exhausted from pretending everything was fine. One afternoon, my sister Emily called. "Daniel, when was the last time you were actually happy?" I laughed. "What kind of question is that?" "I'm serious." I didn't answer. She knew. "Is it Claire?" I said nothing. "Daniel, you're disappearing." Those words stayed with me. Because I realized she was right. I was still going to work. Still paying bills. Still mowing the lawn. Still making dinner. But emotionally, I had disappeared years ago. Then came the Friday night that changed my life. It was November. Cold. Dark. I had just come home after one of the worst days I'd had at work. A major project I'd spent 6 months working on had been canceled. My boss blamed me. I felt humiliated. I came home hoping, stupidly, that Claire might notice. She was lying on the bed, phone in her hand. I stood in the doorway. "Claire?" "What? Can we talk?" She sighed. "About what?" "Us." She put her phone down. "Daniel, I'm really tired." "I know." "Then what do you want?" I sat on the edge of the bed. "I want my wife back." She stared at me. "I don't know what you mean." "I mean the woman who used to hug me when I came home." She said nothing. "The woman who used to hold my hand." Silence. "The woman who used to look at me like I mattered." Claire rolled her eyes. "Are we seriously doing this again?" "Yes." My voice cracked. "Because I'm tired too." She crossed her arms. "I've been tired for 8 years." I stared at her. 8 years? "Yes." I swallowed. "Then why didn't you tell me?" "I did." "When?" She laughed. "You should have figured it out." I felt something inside me collapse. "I've spent 8 years trying to make this marriage work." "No one asked you to?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I begged you for affection." And I just wanted to feel loved." She looked annoyed. Then she said the sentence that ended our marriage. "If you're that desperate for affection, use your own hand." Silence. Absolute silence. I stared at her. She didn't apologize. She didn't look shocked. She didn't even seem to realize what she'd done. She simply picked up her phone again. That's when I understood. It wasn't about affection anymore. It wasn't about romance. It wasn't even about marriage. It was about dignity. I stood. "Okay." She looked up. "What?" "Okay." I walked to the closet. I pulled out a suitcase. Claire laughed. "Are you seriously leaving?" I didn't answer. Daniel, come on. I kept packing. You're being dramatic. I folded my shirts. You always do this. I put my shoes in the suitcase. You'll be back tomorrow. I stopped. Then I looked at her. No. She smiled. You always come back. I shook my head. Not this time. She stared at me. Where will you go? I don't know. Then what are you doing? I picked up my suitcase. I'm choosing myself. She laughed again. But this time I didn't care. I walked out. I drove for almost an hour. I didn't know where I was going. Eventually, I stopped at a hotel. The room was small. One bed, one lamp, one window overlooking a parking lot. I put my suitcase down. Then I sat on the bed and waited for the pain. It came. But it wasn't what I expected. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even crying. I felt empty. Then my phone rang. Claire. I didn't answer. She called again. Then again. Then she sent a message. Where are you? Another. This is ridiculous. Then, come home. I stared at those words. For 8 years I had dreamed of hearing them. But now, they meant nothing, because I finally understood that wanting someone to come home isn't the same as wanting to make them feel at home. I turned off my phone. That night, I slept for the first time in years without waiting for someone to decide whether I deserved affection. The next morning, I called Emily. She answered immediately. Daniel? I couldn't speak. Are you okay? No. Where are you? I told her. She said, come here. I drove to her house. When she opened the door, she didn't ask questions. She hugged me. I broke down. I cried like a child. I tried so hard, I said. I know. I did everything. I know. Why wasn't I enough? Emily pulled away and looked directly into my eyes. Because love isn't a test you pass by trying harder. I stared at her. She continued. You can't make someone love you by becoming everything they want. That sentence changed something inside me. For years, I had believed if I just tried harder, Claire would love me again. But maybe the problem wasn't that I wasn't enough. Maybe I had been trying to get love from someone who had already stopped giving it. The divorce was ugly. Claire suddenly became angry. She told people I had abandoned her. She said I had left without warning. She told friends that I'd thrown away 8 years of marriage because of one argument. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to tell everyone what she had said. But Emily stopped me. Don't turn your divorce into a courtroom for your friends. So I stayed quiet. There were difficult meetings. Lawyers. Paperwork. Arguments about the house. Arguments about money. Arguments about things that suddenly seemed meaningless. At one point, Claire asked, do you really want to throw away everything we built? I looked at her. No. She looked surprised. Then why are you doing this? I'm not throwing away our marriage. I paused. I'm accepting that it ended a long time ago. She started crying. And for the first time, I didn't rush to comfort her. Not because I was cruel. Because I finally understood that her emotions weren't my responsibility anymore. The first few months alone were difficult. I moved into a small apartment. The silence was strange. There was nobody to argue with. Nobody to disappoint. Nobody to wait for. I cooked terrible meals. I burned chicken. I forgot to buy groceries. One night I ate cereal for dinner, and somehow I laughed. I laughed because I realized I was free to make ridiculous choices without worrying whether someone else approved. I started running. I joined a local gym. I reconnected with old friends. I started playing guitar again. I visited my parents more often. I began therapy. Slowly, I discovered something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not excitement. Not romance. Peace. 8 months after I left, Claire called. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Daniel? Hi. There was silence. I miss you. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I was surprised by my own calmness. I miss you too, I said. She started crying. Then come home. I closed my eyes. I can't. Why? Because I finally understand what happened. What? I spent years trying to get you to love me. She was silent. You didn't stop me from trying. What do you mean? You watched me beg. She began crying harder. I didn't know what to do. You could have told me the truth. I was scared. Of what? Of hurting you? I took a breath. You hurt me anyway, she whispered. Can we start over? I thought about it. I really did. Then I said, no. Why? Because I don't want to spend another 8 years trying to convince someone to choose me. She didn't respond. Then she asked, did you ever love me? I looked out my apartment window. Yes. Do you still? I paused. I'll always care about the woman you were. Then I added, but I have to let go of the woman you became. The call ended. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. A few months later, I met Rachel. It happened in a bookstore. I was looking for a book about photography. She was trying to reach something from the top shelf. I helped her. She laughed. Thank you. You're welcome. We started talking. Nothing dramatic, no instant promises, just conversation. Over the next few weeks, we got coffee, then dinner, then walks. One evening, we were sitting on a park bench. The sun was setting. Rachel reached for my hand. I froze. She noticed immediately. Are you okay? I smiled. Yeah. Then why do you look terrified? I laughed. I'm not used to this. Used to what? Someone wanting to hold my hand. She looked at me, then gently squeezed my fingers. You don't have to earn it. I looked at her. What? My affection. Those 4 words nearly broke me, because for 8 years I had believed affection was something I had to earn. Rachel looked at me and said, I like you, Daniel. You don't have to convince me. I looked down at our hands, and I realized something. I wasn't falling in love because Rachel was saving me. I was falling in love because I had finally learned how to stand on my own. Years have passed since I walked out of that house. I don't hate Claire. I don't wish her pain. I don't even regret loving her. Because loving someone isn't the mistake. The mistake is losing yourself while trying to make someone stay. I spent 8 years believing that if I became more patient, she would love me. If I worked harder, she would appreciate me. If I gave her more, she would give something back. But love doesn't work like that. You can be the most loyal person in the world and still be loved by the wrong person. You can give everything and still receive nothing. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't staying. It's leaving. Today, I still have that old photo album, the one from our first years together. Sometimes I look at those pictures. I see 2 people laughing. 2 people who believed they had forever. And I don't feel anger anymore. I feel sadness. Not because I want that life back, but because I wish I'd understood sooner that I deserved more. I deserved someone who would notice when I was hurting. Someone who would reach for my hand without being asked. Someone who wouldn't make me feel ashamed for wanting affection. Someone who wouldn't make me beg for the smallest pieces of love. And most importantly,